Imagine living hundreds of years, exploring various lands, mastering the essence of magic itself, and even slaying the demon king only to think nothing of such achievements. But when your former party members begin to pass due to old age, you begin to rediscover memories you once thought insignificant and live life to the fullest, discovering what it truly means to live in the moment. Our story starts with our group of heroes heading to the royal capital, all wondering what types of celebrations are happening in town. The hero wonders what types of jobs they'll have in the future, especially because the Demon King is now defeated, prompting the priest to wonder if he can find a job where he can drink. The hero turns to the elf, Frieren, asking Frieren how she'll spend her life, especially since elven lives are very long. As the hero's party march through town, they are praised and celebrated, only to stand before the king, who acknowledges their party to house Himmel the hero, Eisen the warrior, Hyder the priest, and Frieren the mage, thanking the heroes for slaying the Demon King. We cut to that night where the town is celebrating their newfound peace, cutting to Himmel, who tells everyone that there will be statues of them erected. As Frieren mocks the town for only giving them 10 copper coins when they first started their adventure, Hyder states that everything is now behind them, and instead, they should celebrate. As the gang gaze off into the night sky, they all acknowledge that it's been 10 years since they started adventuring, reminiscing on their first day, where Himmel and Eisen were almost executed for bad-mouthing the king. They also remember times when Hyder would get so drunk during their adventures and Frieren would constantly fall for the most basic of traps, all erupting in a laughter for only remembering bad memories. Taking a breath, Himmel thanks everyone for the 10 years they spent together, but Frieren wonders what's so amazing about 10 years, reminded that 10 years by human standards is a long time. Just then, they all turn to face the night sky, spotting the air meteor shower that only occurs once every 50 years. As the gang bicker about not getting to see the full beauty of the meteor shower from the city, Frieren utters that she'll take them to a better location next time they see it, making Himmel chuckle, grateful for the memories. The next morning, the party bid goodbye to Frieren, who plans on exploring the central lands to collect and learn more spells. As Frieren leaves, the others wonder how old Frieren truly is, cutting to several years later when Frieren has explored different locations, learned many new things, and has achieved many new goals. When Frieren visits a shopkeeper asking for a shadow dragon's horn, the shopkeeper states that shadow dragons haven't been alive for around 20 to 30 years, disappointing as Frieren needs a shadow dragon horn for her experiments. Frieren remembers that Himmel collected a shadow dragon horn in the Demon King Castle, reasoning that she'll visit to watch the meteor shower with everyone whilst also collecting the shadow dragon horn. As Frieren walks through the capital, she's amazed to see everything has changed over the years, only to suddenly hear Himmel's voice. But when she turns around, Frieren realizes that Himmel has grown quite old. Himmel states that it's been 50 years, both sitting down, only for Frieren to ask about the dragon horn. Remembering the memories from collecting the horn, Himmel happily gives Frieren the horn, telling Frieren that although she doesn't treasure the dragon's horn as much, Himmel himself never forgot the time spent collecting the horn. As Frieren heads outside to deliver the horn, she wonders what's the big deal about a lousy dragon's horn, only to head inside, asking Himmel to head out for the meteor shower. As they leave town, Frieren greets Eisen and Hyder, who are amazed to see Frieren hasn't aged one bit. But Frieren is still against Hyder patting her head. Frieren praises Eisen for seeming the same since they last met, something they all know is due to Eisen's dwarf heritage. As they begin to head off, Frieren tells them that the spot she picked out takes a week to travel to, but seeing as this is like the old days, they all gladly follow Frieren. As the gang tells stories over campfire and battle monsters like the old days, they all eventually make it to a lake, where Himmel thanks Frieren for their final adventure together, completely captivated by their final meteor shower together. With some more time passing, Himmel finally passes away, prompting Frieren and the others to attend Himmel's funeral, but Frieren is scolded for not showing any emotions, making her wonder what this strange feeling that is bubbling up inside her. As the day proceeds, Frieren begins reminiscing on her time with Himmel, all whilst watching his casket be buried, only to break down crying, regretting not spending more time to get to know Himmel better. A few days afterwards, Hyder reveals that he'll be heading back to the Holy City, getting one last look at Frieren as Hyder states he'll probably pass away soon due to all the drinking. As Hyder bids Isen and Frieren farewell, Frieren reveals that she will be starting her new exploration into humans, asking Isen to accompany her on her new journey. But Isen reveals that he too has grown old, asking Frieren to not look so sad. Seeing as there is nothing left, Frieren bids Isen farewell, both heading in the opposite directions, only to cut to 20 years after Himmel's passing, where Frieren is lost in the forest outside the holy city. Just then a young girl appears, asking if Frieren is lost, but when Frieren asks to know where Hyder lives, the young girl takes Frieren to Hyder's home. Frieren is happy to see that Hyder is still alive. Hyder admits that it wasn't too easy to pass away, surprised to hear that Frieren has brought some alcohol for his grave, but Hyder reveals he had stopped drinking ages ago. Seeing the adorable girl serve herself and Hyder some tea, Frieren learns the girl's name is Fern, a war orphan from the southern lands. Frieren finds it unusual for Hyder to adopt Himmel's kindness, but Hyder is more curious as to why Frieren is visiting him. Pleased to hear that Frieren just so happened to be visiting whilst on her adventure to learn more about humans. Hyder asks if Frieren would be willing to take Fern as her apprentice mage, but Frieren is sternly against this, reminding Hyder how easy it is for apprentice mages to pass away during battle. Understanding of Frieren's decision, Hyder gives Frieren an ancient grimoire from the tomb of Uig the Sage, a book meant to contain lost spells for resurrection and immortality. Amazed that such a grimoire still existed, Frieren states that it'll take at least 5 to 6 years to decipher the text, but upon hearing this, Hyder utters that he is indeed quite afraid of dying, asking for Frieren to give him the slightest hope for immortality. As repayment for the grimoire, Frieren agrees to teach Fern some spells. Cutting to later that day, where Frieren had finally managed to track down Fern waiting for her on the cliff of a forest, impressed that Fern is able to conceal her mana so well. Fern states that Hyder will give Fern the title of mage if Fern manages to blast a hole in a boulder across from them, something Frieren praises Hyder for setting Fern. Out of nowhere, Fern conjures a powerful beam of magic, but the beam falls short of reaching the boulder, giving Frieren some motivation to teach Fern, happy to hear that Fern likes magic just like herself. Taking Fern to a nearby waterfall, Frieren tells Fern that long-range magic consists of 3 key factors, these being mana capacity, strength of firing the spell, and the level of the mage itself. When Fern confirms she knows this already, Frieren states that Fern's spell falling short means Fern is lacking in mana and firing strength, something Fern will need to spend time on. Seeing Fern upset, Frieren reminds Fern that her magic control is still very high, something very unique, especially for such a young age. That night, Frieren shares a meal with Hyder and Fern, only to end the night by studying the grimoire. With several years of Frieren training Fern passing by, all three spend time together whilst Frieren continues to decipher the grimoire, but having lost track of time, Frieren reports to Hyder that Fern has grown so much in 4 years. With Hyder happy to hear that, Frieren mentions how she'll probably finish deciphering the grimoire before Fern becomes a fully fledged mage. But as Frieren turns to check on Hyder's reaction, she spots Hyder has collapsed. Frieren helps move Hyder to his bed. Hearing Hyder apologize for the trouble, coincidentally asking Frieren to not look so sad. With Frieren promising to decipher the grimoire fast, Frieren first heads out to inform Fern that Hyder has collapsed, asking Fern to halt her training to look after Hyder. Sadly, Fern states that if she stops now, she won't be able to show Hyder how strong she's gotten before Hyder passes, revealing that Hyder was the one that saved her. Flashing back, a young Fern is seen grasping onto a necklace with a picture of her family, wondering if she should take her own life. Out of nowhere, Hyder appears, advising Fern to reconsider her actions as Hyder once had a friend that had passed away. Hyder states that his friend was the epitome of justice, and Hyder had wished that his life was taken instead of his friend. But since his friend is no longer with him, Hyder states that he'll stay alive to ensure the memories of his precious friends' lives on. With the young Fern remembering the memories she had with her family, Fern in the present declares that Hyder had always feared leaving Fern all alone. Therefore, Fern states that she wants to show Hyder she can fend for herself before Hyder passes away. With Frieren understanding Fern's wishes, Frieren states that she'll allow Fern to do as she pleases, heading back to continue deciphering the grimoire. As more time passes, Fern is seen continuing to improve her mana capacity and firing strength, all whilst Frieren finishes up deciphering the grimoire, only to confront Hyder, asking if Hyder already knew the grimoire didn't contain any spells to bring back the dead nor immortality. Hyder reveals that magic for immortality doesn't exist, happy to hear that Frieren now considers for a mage, meaning Frieren can finally take Fern with her on her travels. With Frieren realizing Hyder had tricked her into training Fern, Hyder states that her reward is in the nearby drawer, requesting for Frieren to take Fern and leave by tonight, as Hyder fears his time is almost up. Frieren calls out Hyder for trying to act tough, revealing that Fern has been waiting to say goodbye to Hyder, breaking down as Frieren orders Hyder to spend his remaining time with Fern. As Frieren goes on a walk, Frieren learns that Hyder had saved Fern, knowing that Himmel would have done the exact same thing, leaving Hyder and Fern alone, only to confirm that Fern had managed to reach the boulder. The next day marks the death of Hyder, prompting Fern and Frieren to pour out some booze on Hyder's tombstone, only for them to head elsewhere. With 26 years passing since Himmel's death, Fern and Frieren continue to adventure together, both completing tasks in order to acquire new spells. Their most recent spell produces warm tea, whereas some previous ones involved removing rust from bronze statues and turning sweet grape sour. As the two head to their next adventure, they meet up with an old lady, only to be guided to a disheveled statue of Himmel. The lady reveals that her town was attacked by a monster years ago, but luckily Himmel had arrived and saved them, ultimately leading to a statue of Himmel being erected in his honor. When the old lady mentions how sad it is to see the statue all beat up, Frieren corrects her, stating that it's Himmel's fault for accepting a statue of himself to be made in the forest, something that reminds the lady that there was an elf accompanying Himmel at the time. Without saying any more, Frieren helps clean up the statue, pleasing the lady, but the old lady finds it sad that the scenery around the statue is too plain. Before Frieren can use a spell to grow some flowers, Frieren suddenly remembers Himmel's favorite flower, the blue moon weed. As the old lady takes them back to her home, she's surprised to hear Frieren knows about the blue moon weeds, as they used to grow in a nearby forest, but have since long died out. Seeing Fern acting weird, Frieren asks to see what Fern is hiding, discovering that Fern was trying to hide seed rats in her coat, intending on setting them free. With both girls heading out, Frieren states that they'll be heading to the nearby forest in hopes of finding some blue moon weeds, something Frieren acknowledges is for her own selfish desires. With several months of Frieren and Fern searching for the blue moon weed, the girls grow used to spending time in town with the old lady and out in the fields. One day, Fern has a chat with the old lady, sad to see that Frieren is fixated on searching for this non-existent flower, even though Frieren could be saving lives. Hearing Fern so intellectually convey her feelings, the lady hands Fern a bag of seeds, asking Fern to tell Frieren how she truly feels. Mustering up the courage, Fern tells Frieren how she feels, prompting Frieren to apologize, as she promises to end her search soon. Fern demands to know when, but Frieren points out that a nearby seed rat has stolen the seed bag the old lady gifted Fern and is leaving behind a trail they should follow. As the girls chase after the seed rat, Fern wonders why Frieren is so fixated on collecting spells, but Frieren states she only started collecting spells because a special someone had complimented her vast knowledge of spells. As both girls stop in front of an abandoned building, Frieren states that seed rats often hide seeds in different locations, but when Frieren spots a blue petal fall from the top of the building, Frieren flies to inspect her findings. Flashing back, Frieren remembers a time when Himmel had told Frieren his favorite flower was the blue moon weed and had wished he could show Frieren one day. On top of the building, Frieren is amazed to see so many gorgeous blue moon weeds, grateful to finally lay eyes on them. As Fern flies after Frieren, Fern still can't understand why Frieren loves collecting spells, but Frieren reminds Fern that Fern became a mage to impress Hyder, something very similar to Frieren's situation. As the girls return to show off their work to the old lady praises the girls for decorating the statue, but before Frieren leaves, she repays Himmel for his gift in the past. On the 27th year since Himmel's passing, Frieren and Fern are seen visiting a trading city of Worm, where Frieren is asked to split up to restock on supplies. When Fern calls out Frieren for making her buy everything, Fern has a bad feeling when Frieren goes off on her own to buy things, having bought a massive skull in the past, clothes dissolving potions, and even random books. When the two split up, Fern chooses to follow Frieren, fearing their traveling expenses will go to waste, but spots Frieren in front of an accessory store. With Frieren distraught at what to purchase, Frieren ends up settling on something, prompting Fern to continue to tail Frieren. Whilst passing through some alleys, Fern wonders if she should leave Frieren be, but when she overhears that Frieren is planning on buying some desserts, Fern gets jealous, having not had any desserts in months. Following Frieren into a smoky tavern, Fern gets worried that Frieren is lost, spotting Frieren speaking with some scary-looking men. As Frieren leaves the tavern, Fern notices that she's heading back to the inn, rushing to finish off her duties, only to apologize for finishing shopping so late. Brushing that aside, Frieren takes Fern to a dessert store in town, allowing Fern to buy whatever dessert she wants, revealing that she had been saving up money to treat Fern and herself. When Fern asks what Frieren would like, Fern corrects herself, stating that she already knows Frieren wants Merker pudding, reminding Frieren of her time with the heroes, where Himmel had mentioned that he knows Frieren's favorite dessert is the Merker pudding. When Frieren feels bad for not knowing much about the others, Himmel mentions his favorite food is an omelet. Eisen's favorite food are sour grapes, and Heider simply loves alcohol. As Fern digs into her dessert, Frieren apologizes for not knowing more about Fern, handing Fern a gift. Pleasing Fern as Frieren remembered Fern's birthday. Fern smiles upon receiving a hair ornament, telling Frieren that it's enough of a birthday gift that Frieren remembered her birthday, confusing Frieren. The next day, the two leave the city, but as Fern walks alongside Frieren with her new hair ornament, Fern asks what the end goal of their adventures are. Frieren simply states that she's simply collecting as many spells as possible, but she does want to retrace her memories with the hero party, something Fern is curious about. When Fern walks beside Frieren, Frieren realizes that Fern is now 16 and taller than her, but gets jealous at how Fern has already outgrown her in other areas. In the Forest of Grobe, Frieren is seen testing out Fern's defensive spells, pointing out how the gaps in Fern's barrier will be her downfall. When Frieren fires multiple projectiles, Fern manages to block with a simple barrier around her body, but ultimately runs out of mana. As the two continue through the forest, Frieren reminds Fern that defensive magic is powerful, but it depletes mana very fast. Therefore, it's best to only cast barriers at the points of impact. As they both cross a river, Fern states that she simply needs to master a single defensive spell, but Frieren scolds her for not reading the book she gave her, as magic theory is just as important as practical applications. Finally arriving at a village, Fern wonders what spells Frieren intends to collect at the village, but Frieren states that she's here for other reasons. Upon approaching some villagers, a village elder immediately recognizes Frieren's white elven hair, leading Frieren to where Qual was sealed. Along the way, Frieren tells Fern that Qual is the Elder Sage of Corruption, a demon that terrorized people for 80 years, up until Himmel and his party sealed him. When Frieren wonders how the Elder knew who she was, the Elder reveals that Himmel would always visit up until his passing, and spoke highly of Frieren, stating that she would take over and watch the seal when Himmel himself was gone. Upon arriving at Qual's seal, Frieren confirms that the seal is indeed weakening, so Frieren will break the seal and defeat Qual the next day. With Fern and Frieren staying the night, Fern deduces that Frieren was the one that sealed Qual, wondering why the heroes chose to seal it over slaying it. Frieren reveals that their party were unable to defeat the demon, as Qual was a powerful mage, having invented the Zoltrak piercing spell, first of its kind that could pierce any sort of defense and destroy the target's body. Legend says that 40% of adventurers and 70% of mages were defeated by that single spell. But hearing something so powerful, Fern wonders how Qual could be defeated, but Frieren reveals such a powerful spell has its downsides. When Fern continues to ask more questions, Frieren scolds Fern for not reading the book she gave her, uttering that Fern will have her questions answered tomorrow. With the big day arriving, the two girls stand before Qual, only for Frieren to warn Fern to be on guard, all whilst Frieren lifts Qual's seal. Glad to be free, Qual learns that he's been sealed for 80 years and that the Demon King had been defeated in his absence. Annoyed, Qual proceeds to cast a Zoltrak, prompting Frieren to instruct Fern to erect a barrier. But when the dust clears, Fern's barrier manages to easily block Qual's killing spell. With Fern demanding to know why her basic barrier was able to block such a deadly spell, Frieren reveals that ever since Qual was sealed away, all of humankind had dedicated resources to studying and defending against the killing spell. After a few years, the humans incorporated said spells into their systems, and as a result, all types of defense magic were improved thanks to the demon. Amazed at what the humans were able to develop in the 80 years that he was sealed, Qual immediately begins analyzing Fern's barrier, noting how the barrier changes depending on the type of offensive magic, meaning the spell consumes a huge amount of mana. As Qual erupts with power, Frieren orders Fern to protect both of them as efficiently as possible, prompting Fern to erect barriers only in the location of Qual's projectiles. Unleashing a massive beam of magic, Qual is impressed that Fern is still able to block his overwhelming magic. But having forgotten about Frieren, Qual helplessly watches as Frieren casts her own Zaltrak killing spell. As Qual begins to disappear, Frieren and Fern head back to the village where Frieren is thanked by the village elder, grateful that they can now live in peace. When the elder hands Frieren his hat, Frieren recognizes the elder as the cheeky brat that flipped her skirt when they first sealed Qual. As the girls leave by carriage, Fern is seen finally reading the book Frieren gave her, but Frieren is glad that she could fulfill Himmel's trust and bring peace to the village once and for all. With the girls heading over to the Grand Channel, Frieren is sad to see the beach is littered with debris, unfortunate as the nearby village used to all clean the beach, but now there isn't enough manpower to tidy up the beach. The village elder requests that Frieren clean up the beach, handing Frieren a grimoire belonging to the legendary mage Flam. But Fern notices something suspicious. As Frieren accepts the offer, the elder leaves for now, but Fern states that she believes the grimoire is fake, something that Frieren already knows. Frieren is happy to see that Fern has been studying, revealing almost all books about Flam are usually fakes, but Frieren states that she needed an excuse to help return the beach to its former beauty. Skipping ahead to when snow has begun to fall, Fern is seen visiting a local bakery, chatting with the shopkeeper as Fern has been frequently purchasing bread from the bakery in the past 3 months. With Fern noting how it's already winter, Fern returns to a messy room, disappointed as Frieren is still asleep. As Frieren struggles to leave her bed, Fern is forced to help prepare, feed, and dress Frieren, dragging the sleepy elf through town and towards the beach. As the girls begin cleaning the beach, Fern points out how sloppy Frieren is, having been forced to take care of Frieren as if she were Frieren's mother. Fern wonders how Frieren behaved during her time with the hero party, but Frieren mentions how they were all very okay with Frieren oversleeping, but Frieren did get scolded once. With Fern curious to know more, the girls wrap up the day with a big fire using the debris, only to enjoy a nice dinner, reporting to the elder that they only have 1/3 of the job left. The elder wonders if the girls will be done by the New Year's festival, something Frieren says will be possible, but when the elder mentions how Frieren can finally join them and watch the sunset this time, Frieren acts awfully cold. The next day, Fern asks if the reason Frieren wanted to clean the beach was related to the festival, learning that every new year, the villagers would watch the sunrise. Frieren mentions how the beach is meant to beautifully reflect the sunrise, but admits that she never woke up early enough to actually watch the sunrise. With more time passing by, Fern continues to nurture our poor Frieren out of bed, both exploring the wrecked ships, discovering hidden gems, only to officially clean the beach of all debris. Completely mesmerized by the beach's beauty, the elder asks if Frieren will be joining them for the sunrise this year, shocking Fern when Frieren agrees to wake up early to see the sunrise. Fern wonders if Frieren will be able to wake up in time for the sunrise, but Frieren states that she'll simply stay up all night and that she wants to see what's so amazing about this sunrise. As Frieren stays up that night, she thinks about a time when Himmel had scolded Frieren for sleeping in and missed the New Year's sunrise in the same village. Confused as to why a mere sunrise would cause Himmel to be so upset they didn't get to see it together. Sadly, during the morning, Fern realized that Frieren is fast asleep, forced to drag Frieren out of bed, fearing that they'll miss the sunset. With both girls staring out into the horizon, Frieren notes how there is nothing special about the sunrise, but upon seeing that Fern is mesmerized by the sunrise's beauty, Frieren admits that Himmel was right, as she's enjoying the sunrise with Fern. Flashing back, we see Frieren and the hero party visiting the graves of Eisen's family, learning that his village was attacked by demons. Hyder chooses to kneel before the graves, praying for their souls to go to heaven. But Eisen mentions how he doesn't believe in the afterlife, prompting Frieren to reveal that thousands of years ago, everyone believed there was no afterlife. But since magic can't observe where souls go, it's hard to define what is truth and what isn't. Hyder states that since there is no actual proof for either side, Hyder likes to think there is a heaven. That way the people that are doing good for the world can at least pass believing that their life was worth it. With the hero party joining Hyder in praying for Eisen's family, we cut to the present where Eisen is once again praying for his family, currently located in the Brett region. Out of nowhere, Frieren calls out to Eisen, weird as they haven't spoken to each other ever since Himmel passed away 30 years ago. As they all sit down for some tea, Eisen is shocked to see Frieren has an apprentice, but Frieren asks if Eisen needs help with anything. Eisen mentions how Hyder and himself had been updating each other with letters. Heading out, they all head to Volume 50 Basin, a location Frieren recognizes, learning that Eisen intends to search for notes from Flam, the legendary mage. When Frieren reminds Eisen that most records on Flam are fake, Eisen reveals that Hyder had figured out the general location of Flam's true notes, based on records from the Holy City. With Frieren convinced, they all agree to start looking for a massive tree. But upon seeing Fern disappointed, Frieren states that they should hurry, surprising Eisen as Frieren never cared for anyone else's time. With the gang beginning to search the entire forest, they spend the night eating and sleeping in the forest, only to search across the sea and in the skies. One day, Fern states that she has found a massive tree near some ruins, all beginning to head towards the tree. But Frieren uses the opportunity to ask Eisen why he's searching for Flam's notes. Eisen reveals that on the day of Himmel's death, Eisen had seen how regretful Frieren felt for not using more time to get to know Himmel, revealing that the notes left behind were said to allow contact with the dead. When Frieren states that she doesn't believe in such nonsense, Eisen states that it's better to know for sure. Plus, Eisen and Hyder had agreed prior to help Frieren get to know Himmel better. Having made it to the massive tree, Fern states that there is a powerful barrier surrounding the tree. But when Frieren heads over to inspect the tree, she utters that even after 1,000 years, her master is still superior to her. Flashing back, Frieren is seen with her master, wondering why her master is so fixated on protecting a small sapling. But her master states that in 1,000 years' time, Frieren will grow to appreciate it, asking Frieren to trust in her teachings, especially since Frieren's master was Flam, the legendary mage. Within an instant, Frieren dispels the barrier guarding the entrance to Flam's notes. Upon glancing at the notes, Frieren is surprised the notes had already been opened to the page regarding communication with the dead, surprised her master knew Frieren would return. Flam's notes recount that the north of the continent housed the land of Oriole, where all the souls rest, a location that Flam had used to speak with her fallen allies. When Fern wonders if the notes can be trusted, Eisen reminds Frieren to consider the best-case scenario when unsure, prompting Frieren to reveal that Oriole is in the same direction as Indy, the current Demon King Castle. With Eisen asking Frieren to go for Himmel's sake, they all head back home via carriage, where Frieren is fast asleep, dreading the thought of going to such a cold place like the Demon King's castle. Sparking up a conversation, Eisen asks how Frieren is treating Fern, impressed to hear that Frieren is retracing her adventures with the hero party, but is also trying to get to know Fern better. Hearing this, Eisen thinks back to how cold Frieren was back then, having never imagined Frieren would take on Apprentice, but reassures Fern that Frieren is a great teacher. As they all return to Eisen's home, Eisen apologizes for not coming with them, checking to see if Frieren remembers the path to Indy, relieved to hear Frieren still remembers it to be through the Will region, across the Regal Canyon, and past the Northern Land checkpoints. As Frieren begins to leave, Eisen informs Fern that it'll be a 10-year adventure, reminding Frieren of her adventure with the hero party, but Frieren states that it won't take too long. As Fern leaves with Frieren, Fern thinks about how she spent half her life with Frieren, flashing back to one of Fern's last conversations with Hyder. Hyder jokes about haunting Fern if she doesn't behave around Frieren, but Fern surprises Hyder with how mature she's grown, making Hyder promise to visit her when he passes. With Fern resting by Frieren's side, the girls ride a carriage to the nearby town of the Will region. But as the girls head through town, they're stopped by a shopkeeper that warns the girls not to go into the mountains. The shopkeeper says there are rumors of ghosts taking people away, but when Frieren gets curious about what type of ghosts, the girls head around town asking for everyone's stories. Apparently, The townsfolk saw ghosts of their departed family in the mountains, with some people saying that the ghosts spoke. When Fern wonders if it is the work of undeads, Frieren states that undeads wouldn't appear as ghosts, as undeads normally appear in the form of rotting corpses or skeletons. With the girls heading to the rooms, Fern notes how Frieren probably knows what is causing the ghost to appear in the mountains, but is cut off when Frieren states that they'll only be staying for a single night in town. Fern demands that Frieren help out the villagers, but seeing Fern so serious about helping the villagers, Frieren agrees to help. As both girls head into the mountains, they explore the locations of said disappearances, where Frieren quizzes Fern on what type of magic created the ghosts, satisfied to hear Fern believes it's illusion magic. Heading deeper into the mountains, Fern briefly remembers a monster that used illusion magic to hunt its prey. A monster Frieren states is the Einsam. The Einsam usually uses illusion magic, creating phantoms of people's loved ones to lure them and only to devour the targets. Luckily, Frieren mentions how the Einsam's illusion magic can be easily destroyed by a mage's projectile, but warns Fern that it may be difficult, as Frieren had to destroy the illusions of her master begging for her life. Upon entering a misty forest, Frieren orders Fern to prepare for the worst, only for Fern to spot an illusion of Hyder in the distance. Preparing to destroy the illusion, Fern suddenly hears Hyder speak fondly of her. Realizing the monster is using Fern's memories to put Fern at ease. When Frieren tries to help Fern out, Frieren suddenly spots an illusion of Himmel, surprised as she was expecting an illusion of her master. Wondering if she has changed, Frieren nonchalantly destroys Himmel's illusion, clearing the misty forest and revealing the Einsam to Fern, prompting Fern to disintegrate Hyder's illusion and the monster. As Frieren reassures Fern that Hyder won't be mad that Fern struck an illusion of him, the girls head into the Regal Canyon, spotting a massive crimson dragon along with its nest, where Frieren spots the grimoire she's been looking for. Frieren states that dragons use magic-infused items to build their nest, asking Fern to take out the solar dragon. But when Fern conjures a powerful spell, her spell simply deflects off the dragon's thick exterior. With the dragon now awake, Frieren cries that they should flee, forcing Fern to lure away the dragon. But having barely managed to lose the dragon, Fern cries that as mages they will have a hard time defeating the dragon. Frieren acknowledges Fern's cries, uttering that they'll need some help as we flash back to when Frieren and Ison were camping out in the forest. Ison states that he has an apprentice of his own by the name of Stark, stating that he'll be a great frontliner for Frieren's adventures and that Stark lives in the village near the Regal Canyon. As the girls visit the nearby town, they wonder why the villagers aren't more afraid of the dragon. But Fern asks why Frieren wants the grimoire so badly. Frieren reveals that the grimoire has a spell that allows mages to see through clothes, weirding Fern out. But out of nowhere, an old lady states that Stark wants to meet the girls. Surprised, the girls follow the old lady, learning that 3 years ago the Crimson Dragon had massacred their town. But luckily Stark had arrived, scaring the dragon away, and ever since has been protecting their town. Upon arriving near a massive rocky wall, Stark is seen playing with some town kids, only to greet Frieren and Fern, asking them to not agitate the dragon so much. Stark tries to point out that he received a mark from the dragon in the past, but Frieren simply asks for Stark to drop the act. When Stark learns that Frieren used to adventure with Ison, Stark asks for the old lady and kids to give them some privacy, revealing that he's proud that he abandoned Ison. Frieren asks why Stark doesn't just slay the dragon, but Stark wants to know why the girls are here, learning that they've come to recruit Stark and also want the grimoire in the dragon's nest. Stark gets confused as to why Frieren wants the grimoire so badly, but doesn't mind joining Frieren's party, but reveals that he has had trouble defeating the dragon, asking for Frieren's help. Frieren states that they can defeat the dragon together if Stark distracts the dragon for 30 seconds. But upon seeing Stark refuse such an offer, Frieren deduces that Stark has never fought a monster before. Stark breaks down, begging for Frieren's help, admitting that when he first confronted the dragon, he was so scared seeing the beast, but strangely after a while the dragon flew away, and Stark was praised by the villagers. With Fern disgusted by how pathetic Stark looks, Frieren states that she has full faith in Stark, heading over to the massive fissure in the nearby wall, only to realize something about the fissure. As the girls leave, Frieren states that they'll be meeting back here tomorrow, hinting at the fact that Stark should use this opportunity to grow. That night, Frieren and Fern enjoy a nice dinner, all whilst the villagers praise Stark for being a kind person. Fern still can't help but see Stark as a cowardly boy, but Frieren brings up the first time Fern fought a monster, apologizing for teasing Fern. With the girls heading back to their inn, Fern wonders why the dragon doesn't just attack the village. But Frieren hints at the fact that it may be Stark, suggesting that Fern visit Stark if she's curious about who he is. With Fern heading to visit Stark, Frieren sits in her room, thinking back to when she had asked Ison if Stark is strong. Ison reveals that Stark was the only person to have fled like a coward when the monsters attacked his hometown, someone Ison states is exactly like himself. Hence, he taught Stark everything he knew. In the dead of night, Stark is seen wielding his axe, cleaving it into the rocky wall, digging a deeper and deeper fissure with every swing. With Stark standing before the giant fissure, Stark turns to spot Fern behind him, having just been caught for creating the massive fissure. Fern asks why Stark doesn't just slay the dragon terrorizing the nearby village, but Stark states that since the dragon hasn't attacked yet, there is no need for him to slay the beast. As Stark begins to leave, Fern asks if Stark will slay the dragon when it does attack. Learning that although Stark knows the village depends on him, he still might consider running if the dragon is too great. Stark reveals that he had gained a mark on his face during a spar with his master Ison, believing that Ison was mad at him as Ison never praised Stark. Leaning in to inspect Stark's hand, Fern concludes that Stark would never run from a fight, confusing Stark as he wonders how Fern would know. Fern reveals that on her first battle with a deadly monster, Fern had begun to flee in terror, but when she realized Frieren wouldn't help her, Fern had no choice but to steel her resolve and fight. Fern states that although Stark is a coward, she believes Stark will rise to the challenge to protect the village when the time comes, something that makes Stark think about Ison. Fern is seen reporting her chat with Stark to Frieren, but when Frieren heads to the fissure to look for Stark the next day, she's disappointed to see that Stark has fled the scene. When Frieren states that they'll be slaying the dragon instead, Fern refuses to leave the safety of a nearby tree, but out of nowhere Stark appears, asking if he only needs to distract the dragon for 30 seconds. Stark states that if he were to pass away during the battle, Stark asks for Frieren to guarantee the dragon is slayed, confusing Frieren as to why Stark is willing to give his life for the safety of the village. Stark reminds Frieren that he lived in the village for 3 years, cutting to later that day where the three are now standing before the red dragon, prompting Frieren to tease Stark for shaking out of fear. Frieren reveals that Ison showed the same fear before a great fight, as Ison would embrace the fear, something Frieren sees in Stark. Hearing that his master also would fear his battles, Stark marches into the range of the dragon, but Frieren notes that the dragon is being cautious as to not attack due to the enemy it's facing. As the dragon unleashes its fiery breath, Stark begins making his way towards the dragon, ducking and weaving until he's able to close the distance between himself and the beast. Flashing back, Frieren asks why Ison had hit Stark during their last spar, but Ison reveals that he feels terrible for hitting his student. But in the moment, Ison had sensed immense power from Stark, a power that caused Ison himself to shake. As Frieren watches Stark shatter the claws of the dragon, Stark chooses to stay close to the dragon, grabbing onto it as it takes off. Being flung into the air, Stark senses that the dragon is lining up another breath of fire, swiftly gripping his axe, only to cleave the dragon into the ground. Seeing an opening, Stark cries for Fern and Frieren to finish off the dragon, but Frieren stops Fern from making a move, declaring that Stark had soloed the dragon. Shocked at his own power, Frieren rushes to congratulate Stark on his first battle. But more importantly, Frieren is excited to steal all the loot in the dragon's nest. Seeing Frieren fixated on the random items, Stark mentions how Ison would always talk about how Frieren made their hero's journey ridiculous and fun, cutting back to a time when Frieren had decided to make shaved ice in a dungeon. Ison had grown annoyed as they were wasting so much time, but Himmel reminds Ison that they have all the time in the world, so they should enjoy the journey as they go. As the three return to tell the village the good news, they all begin heading out, only to try out the grimoire. Fern uses the spell to see through Stark's clothes, disgusted that he's so small, but Stark states that he'll be joining Frieren and Fern on their future journeys. In the fortress city of Vol located in the Regal Canyon, Frieren and gang are refused entry towards one of the northern checkpoints by the guard, hearing that monsters are more active than ever. As the guard heads to chat with the Castellan, they warn the gang not to cause trouble in the town, But Frieren is perfectly okay with staying in town, planning on exploring the magic shops in town. Seeing Fern's cold glare, Frieren states that she'll head over to book them a room. But when Stark offers to get food with Fern, Fern's glare sends Stark in search of food alone. Now alone, Fern overhears that the Northern Army plans to defeat the enemies in 2 years, meaning their checkpoint won't be open for another 2 years. Cutting to Stark, he has entered a familiar tavern, served the Jumbo Berry special dessert. Confused as he used to split the dessert with Ison, but now the dessert looks so small. Stark notes how he has gotten bigger, having saw his master's broad shoulders as something to admire. But after some time, he outgrew his master. Out of nowhere, Fern appears, eyeing down Stark's dessert. But instead, Fern chooses to order a glass of milk, diligently sitting next to Stark. Fern asks how Stark would feel staying in the city for 2 more years. Relieved to hear that Stark thinks it's annoying as well, but Stark gets weirded out by how Fern is acting. Both heading outside to assess the walls, Stark asks if they could simply fly over the gates. But Fern reminds Stark that a barrier has been erected to prevent flying monsters from entering. With no other choice, they head over to the Merchants Guild, but are sad to learn that all trades towards the northern land have been shut down, meaning that they can't sneak out via that way either. Coming up with another idea, the two decide to visit the Black Market and Thieves Guild, using Stark's connections and demeanor to find a solution, but sadly there is still nothing that can be done. As the two stand above the walls, overlooking the view, Fern wonders why Stark is being so cooperative, deducing that Stark has an ulterior motive to leave the walls. But Stark simply utters that he's running out of time. Stark mentions how Ison and himself visited this exact location when he was younger, telling Stark stories about how he visited the northern lands with his hero party and had enjoyed every second of the 10-year journey. Stark reveals that he intends on having a great journey with Fern and Frieren, promising to return and repay Ison with stories of his own before Ison passes. As both return to town, Fern spots Frieren acting strange, cornering Frieren in an alley only to learn that the town's guards are looking for Frieren. Out of nowhere, the same guard at the checkpoint kneels to apologize to Frieren, prompting the Castellan of the city to apologize as well for his guard being so rude to Frieren. When Frieren reassures the Castellan that she wasn't offended, the Castellan believes that Frieren is here to slay the remnants of the Demon Lord's army, permitting Frieren to pass through the checkpoint, but this disappoints Frieren. With the town throwing a massive celebration to acknowledge Frieren and her party's departure, Frieren mentions how she never liked the outlandish welcomes and departures. Stark wonders if this is how Ison felt, making Frieren suddenly remember a similar time when she departed with the hero party, curious as to what parallels will arise next. Flashing back, Frieren is seen walking alongside the hero party, all discussing the validity of Flam's grimoire, especially with the countless fakes and imitations that exist. Waking up early, Frieren spots Stark and Fern making breakfast, shocking Fern as this is a rare scenario. Later that day on Ung Road, the gang were tasked with clearing a path for a merchant, grateful as the road had been blocked off due to a landslide. When Stark sees Frieren's magic, he wonders why Frieren doesn't just carry the merchant's cart over with magic. But Fern is strongly for helping everyone, not just the single merchant. Taking a quick break, Stark thanks the merchant for the water, wondering what may have caused the landslide, surprised to hear that it must have been the skirmishes between the northern lands and the demons. Getting back to work, Fern requests that Stark help her out a bit, but Stark asks that Fern be more casual with him. But when Fern tries speaking with Stark more casually, Stark gets insulted, annoying Fern as they continue to work. With the road cleared, the merchant offers to lead the gang to the nearby village, amazed that he finally got to meet an elf. Frieren acknowledges that although elves live long lives, elves are slowly going extinct, as most don't intend on reproducing, with the most recent elf Frieren met being around 400 years ago. Finally arriving at the town, the gang spot a line of merchants lining up to enter the town, learning that tonight is the Liberation Festival. The festival is meant to commemorate the hero party ridding the area of demons, and involves decorating the statues of the heroes in town. Frieren still can't understand why humans throw parties, but the merchant reminds Frieren that it's been 80 years since the Demon King was slayed, and in human years, 80 years is a whole lifetime. Flashing back, Frieren remembers a time when Himmel had requested that their statues be placed through various towns, annoying Frieren as she believed Himmel simply wanted to show off. But Himmel reveals that the statues are meant to remind Frieren of their adventures together as the hero party. That night, the gang stand among the crowd, watching as the hero party is celebrated, but the merchant does note how Frieren looks very similar to the elf statue. The next morning, they continue their journey, heading to the Graf Granat's domain, where they notice an abundance of guards surveying the town. When Frieren wonders who should do the shopping, Frieren suddenly freezes, equipping her staff, only to state that she senses demons approaching. When some demons turn the nearby corner, they spot Frieren charging up a spell, but luckily a nearby knight tackles and stops Frieren from firing the spell. Approaching Frieren, the demon asks if Graf Granat had hired Frieren to attack him, but Graf states that he's not foolish enough to attack Lord Lugner out in the open, especially since Lugner is her seeking peace. Kneeling down, Lugner states that he senses Frieren's bloodlust-filled glare, shaming Frieren for looking at him as if he were a wild beast. Frieren fires back, stating that Lugner is simply using human speech to blend in and manipulate the humans. But having heard enough, Frieren is dragged away to be locked up. With Stark and Fern shocked at what just happened, they choose to visit Frieren, who is locked up in the dungeon under the mansion. Frieren states that she'll only be locked up for a measly 2 to 3 years, but Fern scolds Frieren for always wanting to waste time. Frieren asks who the peace envoy demons are, learning that the envoys are linked to Aura, the Guillotine, one of the 7 sages of destruction who served the Demon King. Apparently, 28 years ago, Aura had regained her strength and had been fighting with the domain of Graf Granats. But now Aura has sent envoys to seek peace, something Frieren states sounds fishy. When Stark wonders why they can't just talk things out with the demons, Frieren questions if Stark or Fern know how demons learn to speak the human language, revealing that demons only eat humans. During her time with the hero party, Himmel and Frieren were forced to hunt down a child demon, having supposedly devoured the child of a human couple. But when Himmel went to slay the creature, Himmel hesitated since the demon behaved just like a child. When Frieren offered to shoulder the burden, the town's chief had ordered everyone to spare the demon, giving it a second chance. But that was something Frieren had advised everyone against doing. With days passing, the chief had given the demon girl a place to stay along with food to eat, but Frieren kept a close eye on her, all whilst the chief and her daughter considered the demon girl as one of their own. One day, the chief's building was burnt down by the demon girl, and the chief ended up passing due to being attacked by the demon. When Himmel demands to know why the demon killed the chief, the demon slowly approaches the couple of the first daughter she ate, offering the chief's daughter as a replacement. Sensing that the humans hate her, the demon girl takes the chief's daughter as hostage, but Himmel easily recaptures the chief's daughter, permitting Frieren to slay the demon. When Frieren fires an incineration spell at the demon, Frieren states that demons don't have a sense of family, forced to live and roam alone since birth. But on that day, Frieren learned that the demon girl had intentionally manipulated everyone, knowing that she would get to live a little longer. Frieren states that Flam described monsters that can speak as demons, as they imitate human speech to lure other humans in, something Stark and Fern find disturbing. As Stark and Fern leave, we cut to Lugner, sitting in the mansion and waiting for a meeting with Graf. Lugner admits that Frieren was right about demons, curious as to where he recognizes Frieren from, stating that demons will forever hunt down humans. With Frieren suspecting that the town won't last too long, we follow Lugner and his followers enter Graf's son's bedroom, learning that Graf's son was gifted a sword by the king, but had passed away 10 years ago whilst fighting Aura. Raising his son's sword to Lugner's neck, Graf reveals that he has brought Lugner here to slaughter him. But upon glancing around the room, Lugner notices that Graf has been keeping his son's room clean for the past 10 years. Lugner utters that the humans slayed his father, reminding Graf that they've come here to stop unnecessary bloodshed, ultimately convincing Graf and his knights to lower their blades. With Graf sending Lugner and his followers to the guest room, Lugner admits that he doesn't know what a father is, but has identified Graf as an empathetic man. Lugner states that he'll grow close to Graf and have him lower the town's defensive barrier, and only then will Lady Aura's forces conquer the town. Lugner suddenly notices Drat is missing, learning from Liney that Drat has disappeared to eliminate an obstacle, cutting to Drat entering the underground dungeons, slaying a guard only to enter Frieren's cell. Drat declares that he's here to kill Frieren, knowing that Frieren is the only loose end that can ruin their scheme. But Frieren coldly warns Drat that she is stronger than Aura herself. Smirking, Drott doubts Frierin's strength, dragging her into the air with a single wire around her neck, impressed that Frierin had encased her neck with mana to prevent her decapitation. Drott states that his wires are the strongest amongst all the demons, tugging harder on the spell, but Frierin still manages to defend her neck. When Frierin admits defeat, Drott smirks, but Frierin scolds Drott for letting his guard down, suddenly cutting off one of Drott's arms. When Drott tries to bind Frierin with multiple wires, Frierin simply severs Drott's other arm, instantly slaying Drott before he can speak. Frierin states that she'll simply slay the other two demons and convince Graf that the demons are evil, but upon exiting her cell, Frierin discovers the guard Graf had dispatched. Cutting to Stark and Fern, they enjoy a nice meal in the peaceful town, both shoveling down their food, as they realize they need to convince Graf to free Frierin before any harm befalls the town. Stark notes how earlier he could sense Lugner's immense power. Pissed that Lugner didn't even pay attention to Stark, as Lugner knew he could dismantle everyone but Frierin in mere seconds. Beginning to shake out of fear, Stark accidentally spills his drink on himself, offered a handkerchief by Fern. As Stark cleans himself up, they both agree that they need to head over to protect Graf in case the demons attack. But when Stark tries to return the handkerchief, Fern prefers Stark keep it. Following Liney and Lugner, Liney reports that she can no longer sense Drott nearby. Curious as to who Frierin is, but out of nowhere Graf and his knights rush into the room. Graf reports that Frierin has escaped, prompting Lugner to offer up Liney's location magic, but Graf refuses, asking where Drott is. When Lugner tries to come up with an excuse, Graf has his men surround Lugner and Liney, revealing that he knows Frierin is a powerful mage, demanding once more to know where Drott is. With no other option, Lugner draws his own blood, instantly decapitating all the knights in the room, only to turn his attention to Graf. Lugner reveals how excited he is to finally be killing, nonchalantly pricking his own finger on Graf's sword, only to use the blood to pierce Graf's stomach. With Graf bleeding out, Lugner states they need Graf to help remove the town's barrier. Cutting to later that evening, where Stark and Fern are walking through town, only for Fern to detect Frierin in a disguise. Fern asks why Frierin escaped, learning that Frierin disposed of one of Lugner's demons, but had to escape since the guard outside her door was killed, and Frierin didn't want to be blamed for slaying the guard, since demon corpses dissipate into mana and leave behind no trace. Frierin states that she'll be leaving town, but Fern and Stark remind Frierin that there are still demons in town, making Frierin suggest that Fern and Stark handle the demons in town. Seeing the two unsure about their skills, Frierin reassures the two that they'll be fine, inspiring Fern to drag the cowardly Stark towards the demons. At the same time, Frierin detects a powerful ball of mana 10 kilometers from town watching them, deducing that it must be Aura the guillotine, but knowing that Aura is strong, Frierin reasons she should finish this quickly. In the dead of night, Fern and Stark sneak past a body of water, heading over the walls of Graf's mansion, only to enter into the mansion through one of its windows. At the same time, Lugner tells Graf about his love for magic, revealing that most demons spend their entire life researching and honing their own particular magic. But Lugner does acknowledge how strange magic is, admiring Flam's unique barrier that prevents any type of demon from entering. Lugner speculates that Flam's genius barrier casted 1,000 years ago is stronger than any present spell, but since Graf and his Granat family has maintained the barrier for generations, Lugner demands to know how to control the barriers, leaving Lugner to consider his options. Lugner orders Liney to search for any grimoires in the bedroom, whilst he searches the study room. Seeing an opening, Stark sneaks into Graf's room, attempting to free Graf, but his trembling hands fail to cut the magic binds around Graf. Graf asks Stark to take his Granat amulet and flee with the citizens, but Stark refuses, stating that he won't leave Graf behind. Out of nowhere, Lugner and Liney reappear, demanding to know if Graf knows Stark, but Graf simply states he's a lost child. When Lugner agrees to let Stark flee, Graf feels bad, spotting how much Stark is trembling, but Stark gets annoyed that Lugner is underestimating him. Gripping his axe, Stark dashes behind Lugner, managing to land a slash, but Lugner simply uses his blood to repel Stark backwards, conjuring a massive blood hand to pin Stark to the ground. Lugner praises Stark for trying to fight him solo, but Stark reveals that Fern has been with them undetected, giving Fern an opening to land a powerful spell onto Lugner. With Lugner confused as to how Fern avoided Liney's detection, Lugner demands to know what spell he was hit with, shocked to hear that Fern had learned the killing spell Zoltrak. Lugner utters the ordinary demon Zoltrak spell shouldn't have damaged him so badly. But Fern ignores his stalling, preparing to finish off Lugner, but Liney steps up to fight. Stark reasons that they should get Graf some help first, both fleeing with Graf for now, but Lugner reveals that his blood is on Fern and Stark so they can chase them after he's healed up. Liney offers to hunt them down herself, but Lugner reveals that Fern's Zoltrak spell has been modified to a demon-killing spell, a modification of Zoltrak that specializes in slaying demons. Seeing Fern's silhouette earlier, Lugner remembers an elf by the name of Frieren, being the person that helped analyze the initial Zoltrak spell, but was also granted the title, Frieren the Slayer, for most demons slayed in all of history. As Frieren descends upon Aura and her army, Stark and Fern have managed to get Graf some help, grateful as he promises to pardon Frieren, as Frieren was right to not trust the demons all along. Stark gets excited as Frieren can now roam through town freely. But Graf hears that Frieren was the elf from the original hero party, disgraced to have imprisoned one of the saviors of his family's land. Greeting Aura, Frieren acknowledges that it's been 80 years since they last fought, asking if Aura would retreat now. Smirking, Aura has some of her men slash at Frieren, but Frieren nonchalantly dodges, noting that Aura has more puppets than before. Frieren knows how only powerful demons with enough magic can control an army, but Frieren does despise how disgusting Aura's magic is, recognizing some of the suits of armor being controlled, declaring that she'll kill Aura once and for all. As Aura takes out her scale of obedience, we cut to Graf explaining the reason why Aura is one of the 7 sages of destruction, revealing that her scale allows Aura to weigh her soul's mana capacity with another, and the soul with the greater mana capacity gains control of the other for eternity. Fern asks if there is a counter, but Graf does mention how the scale does judge fairly, so the only way is to have someone with a greater mana capacity face Aura, but this hasn't been done in the past 500 years. Graf also reveals that souls with great wills can temporarily break the mind control, but Stark knows that it's a temporary solution, since Aura would simply get rid of those with strong wills to avoid any loose ends. As Frieren continues to dodge and evade Aura's army, Aura grows amused seeing Frieren dancing around, but Frieren enchants her staff, immediately freeing the men around her from Aura's curse. Shocked, Aura notes how Frieren must have used a lot of mana to break her curse, wondering why Frieren would use such a delicate tactic when Frieren can simply blast away the suits of armor. Frieren reveals that Himmel had scolded Frieren in the past for harming the cursed armors. Therefore, Frieren will make sure to wipe out Aura for good. At the same time, we hear the priest reassure everyone that the church they are in is protected by a strong barrier, giving Stark a reason to head out. Stark states that it won't be long before Lugner and Liney recover, and seeing as they are no match for the demons anyway, Stark states he'll go and seek Frieren's help. At first, Fern gets annoyed at how cowardly Stark sounds, but after some thought, Fern agrees to help evacuate everyone while Stark goes to get Frieren. On the town walls, Stark hands Fern Graf's amulet that'll help convince people to work with her. But when Fern feels bad seeing Stark all bloodied up, Fern suddenly realizes something, tossing her blood-stained coat over the wall. Detecting that someone else's blood is on Stark, Fern is suddenly pinned to a nearby wall by Lugner's blood, all whilst Liney rushes Stark, conjuring an axe only to isolate Stark. Stark demands to know why Liney moves like Eisen, all whilst Lugner apologizes for not killing Fern instantly, mocking Fern's grin as he states that demons can conceal their mana as well. Annoyed at how much Lugner is talking, Fern asks for Lugner to simply finish her off, but Lugner is more curious as to how strong Stark is, amused to hear that Stark is Eisen the hero's best student. Lugner also demands to know where Frieren is, not convinced to hear that Frieren simply fled town, knowing that Frieren wouldn't simply leave knowing there's still demons in town. As Lugner racks his brain, he suspects that Frieren will be dealing with Aura, but Fern suddenly calls for her staff, setting herself free, only to demand Lugner not move. Fern states that Lugner is arrogant, believing that no other human but Frieren is worthy of facing him. But when Fern states she'll blast a hole through Lugner's body, Lugner welcomes Fern to try. Flashing back, Fern and Frieren are seen finishing off some demons, making Fern ask how she compares to Frieren. Frieren states that Fern's mana and technique will never be able to reach Frieren's level since she has lived much longer than Fern. But Frieren admits that Fern's cast speed surpasses her own. As Lugner turns around, Fern manages to fire off a spell, surprising Lugner, as he would have died if he didn't move first. Seeing as Lugner protected his heart, Fern deduces that a demon's heart is their weak point, only to spot Lugner releasing an array of blood. Following Liney and Stark, Liney mentions how disappointing it is that Stark is already defeated, but gets excited seeing Stark refuse to stay down. Even though Lugner has greater control of his magic, each attack Lugner makes, Fern manages to evade and counter. Seeing as he's being overwhelmed, Lugner attempts to exhaust Fern's mana. But as Lugner notices Fern slowly chipping away at his defenses, Lugner orders Liney to finish off Stark and help him out. Liney gets annoyed at how passive Stark is, managing to land a deadly slash to Stark's eye. But Stark is more curious as to how Liney knows Eisen's fighting style. Liney reveals that she can copy any movement once she has seen it, replacing her axe with a sword, only to dash forward. With Stark continuing to defend, Liney once again exchanges her sword for a spear, tossing the spear towards Stark only to scare Stark when Liney barely scrapes Stark's neck with a dagger. Liney says that she recognized Stark's movements to be similar to the great hero Eisen, leaping over Stark only to cleave down with an axe. Since Liney is a perfect copy of Eisen, Stark knows he'll eventually lose, ultimately failing to defend, only to be slammed into the ground. As Stark's body lays limp, Liney heads to assist Lugner, but Stark is still barely conscious, remembering his time training with Eisen. When Stark states that he'll never be as strong as Eisen, Eisen says he agrees, but instructs Stark to continue to get up and never falter against strong warriors. That way Stark will never truly be defeated. With Stark forcing his body up, Liney advises Stark to stay down, but Stark states that he's still not done, remembering that Eisen's slashes were far stronger than Liney's. As Fern and Lugner's magic erupt across the skies, Stark rushes Liney, leaving himself wide open for Liney to land a lethal blow to his stomach. When Liney fails to cut through Stark's tough body, Stark uses the chance to completely shred the left side of Liney's body, but realizing that Liney has been defeated, Lugner checks to see what happened, allowing Fern to land the demon-killing spell on Lugner's heart.